Alright everyone. I could have made this video sooner, but I wanted to have as much information as possible available to you. Okay. Yesterday, in the United States it would have been the afternoon, and in the rest of this part of the world it would have been during the evening and during the night. President Trump had a very lengthy meeting with opposition leaders, the Democrats, and they warned him of the consequences of a full-scale war with Iran. Once they left, he had members of the Joint Chiefs step in, and they spent many hours discussing a possible retaliatory strike against Iran. In my last video, I was not sure to the extent of it, but I knew that it would involve cruise missiles and bombers. I was correct. That was their plan. Now, they are not disclosing exactly what the targets, where the targets were located, but the three targets that they were going to hit were SAM sites. Given where the drone was shot down, the SAM sites are somewhere along this coast, due to the fact that the drone was shot down here. Of course, the United States claims it was here, in this area. But regardless, the missile that shot it down was between this area. So probably this area would be hit, along with some other things along here. Now this area here, as I will show in a few minutes, is basically a death trap for incoming aircraft from the south, from the west, and from the east. This entire tip of land here, which I believe belongs to Oman, this area here, and this is the UAE, but there's a part of it up here that is a part of Oman. All of these islands here are all military installations controlled by Iran. They are heavily fortified. They have very long-range missiles. Those areas would probably not be hit. Like I said, that's a death trap for aircraft. Now, as for naval vessels shooting cruise missiles at them, you could do that, but I'm not sure how successful that would be because those could be shot down. So, it would be SAM sites, possibly radar installations, and maybe even command and control. The Iranian Navy and Air Force would not be targeted, that I know of. I'm sure that was on the table as well, but the strike that President Trump went with had to do with retaliation. For some reason, they did not inform him of how many casualties there would be with the Iranians. And President Trump, in the last 10 minutes, the bombers were already in the air. The B-52s that were based out of over by here in the UAE. They had taken off, and they were already moving. Now, either they were from this direction, like I said, which doesn't make sense, to be a death trap. They were probably going this way, which would make sense given where they're heading towards and to avoid the instant death zone. So they literally took off. And President Trump said, how many casualties would there be? And they told him, and he said that the strike was not proportionate to losing a drone. It would be somewhere around 150 plus Iranians would have been killed. All because the United States lost a very expensive drone, a Global Hawk. So he called it off. And you want to know something very interesting here in the United States? The liberal media, which just a few days ago was bashing President Trump for being a warmonger, they are now bashing him for avoiding a war. So, this is 100% proof that no matter what the man says or does, it is never good enough. Because what Trump did is he just averted possibly the most destructive war the Middle East will ever know. That is very possible. But what do I know, right? Maybe he should have used nuclear weapons instead. I'm sure that would have been very appropriate for losing an expensive flying robot. It's ridiculous. At the same time that these bombers were on their way, somewhere over here in the Persian Gulf, there is a Poseidon patrol plane, which is also an anti-submarine aircraft that the United States possesses. The Iranians, noticing that the Americans were preparing an attack in retaliation for shooting down the drone, Iran was also simultaneously going to shoot down this Poseidon aircraft. That would have killed 38 Americans. So we would have over, let's say, 170, 180 Iranian casualties. 150 at the least. At the same time, America would have lost 38 from the aircraft being shot down. Possibly some of the bombers would have been shot down too. Because something that is not being discussed in the media is I'm hearing no talk, at least in the United States, I'm not hearing any talk about these aircraft having escorts. And we will get into that because I find that very unusual. That this Poseidon was not called back to base. These bombers, when they were launched, had no escorts. And they did not inform President Trump of the casualties. And when he called it off, now they are turning on him. There is now talk of President Trump firing John Bolton. It is very possible that Trump, the whole time, is being lied to about the situation and being manipulated into starting this conflict. Or, at the very least, escalating it. Now, I'm going to read you here from President Trump's Twitter about what happened. President Obama made a desperate and terrible deal with Iran and gave them $150 billion plus. That's an exaggeration, but I'm going to read to you what he said. $1.8 billion of it was in cash. Iran was in big trouble, and he bailed them out. Gave them a free path to nuclear weapons, and soon. Instead of saying thank you, Iran yelled, "Death to America." I terminated the deal, which was not even ratified by Congress, and imposed strong sanctions on Iran, that is. They are a much weaker nation today than at the beginning of my presidency. When they are causing major problems throughout the Middle East, now they are bust. On Monday, they shot down an unmanned drone flying in international waters, or possibly it was, Iran's. He continues and says, "We were cocked and loaded to retaliate last night on 3 different sites. When I asked, 'How many will die?' 150, sir," was the answer from a general. 10 minutes before the strike, I stopped it. It was not proportionate to shooting down an unmanned drone. I am in no hurry. Our military is rebuilt and ready to go. By far the best in the world. Sanctions are biting, and more will be added tonight. Iran can never have nuclear weapons. Not against the U.S., and not against the world." So, that is what he said. I have some images here. This is what a Poseidon looks like. This is the type of aircraft that Iran was preparing to attack. This is an example of a B-52 taking off. This is the range of Iran's anti-aircraft missiles, batteries, the SAM sites. And this is what an Iranian Tomcat looks like, which is an F-14 left over from the 1970s, before the revolution happened. These were bought by the Shah of Iran from the Ford and from the Carter administration. On top of all of this, there have been some other things that have been developing. There have been some more attacks in Yemen. Russia has been making more moves diplomatically with Lebanon and with Baghdad. There is still ongoing continuous fighting in Idlib, which I'm sure will continue to escalate. So far with Israel and Egypt, I have not heard anything more. However, with the very bizarre and sudden death of... what was his name? I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I apologize. In the description I will correct his name. I believe it's Mohammed Morsi, who dropped dead in court. I'm hearing some very disturbing tales and rumors about what happened when he was in court. I cannot confirm those, but I speculate that he was assassinated. If he was not assassinated, then they basically let him die. So that is very unusual. Of course, there was the Khashoggi report that came out, and that's sort of a loaded thing. The Turkish are still leaning towards Russia, at least geopolitically for now. There is still the debate over the F-35 from America, and then them buying missile systems from the Russians. But as for the situation with Iran, Iran called off the attack on the Poseidon as soon as the U.S. turned the bombers around. Tat for a tat, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. They have to negotiate and end this before it gets any worse. Thank you.